we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. Welcome everyone again to another great episode with just me and you. You know, as I love these doing these solo ones, you know, we want to keep going with the podcast. And if you guys like it too, you can go and support at the Patreon at patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. You can also follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram at the Bigmark Podcast. And, you know, if you like the videos, hit that bell so you know when our next video drops.
Do it.
And yeah, hit the likes and, you know, rate and do all that fun stuff, you know, as we always ask. And thanks for listening, everyone who's coming back, because today we're gonna do a little episode on yoga. We got our boys Jack and Christian behind the mic. What's up, boys?
Follow me on Instagram by Jack Williams.
Yeah, everyone check it out.
He's reaching now.
That's called marketing, boys.
Chaos.
Free promote.
Yeah, Chrissy Chaos, shout out. I know you're watching. Anyway, I kind of want to talk about yoga because, you know, it's something that I've been really interested in and, you know, haven't really, you know, done a lot of talking about it / you know, it's not something I always preach in my life. And to be truthfully honest, it's something that haven't been into as much lately, you know, with COVID and everything happening. I've been really brutal about my practice and only doing it barely ever. Totally honest with you guys. You know how I love you guys and I want to be honest. Something I want to get back into. So I always said when we first started this podcast, you know, it's something that's going to keep us honest, that when we say something on the podcast, it's going to get done. And like I said, you know, this is just one of those things where, you know, something that I've always been really interested in and want to get back into, and thought, you know, we'd spend a little time together. Anyway, I kind of wanted to start a little bit with how I got into yoga. I mean, I probably got into yoga, I want to say in around the summer of 2010, 2011-ish. And at the time, it was definitely popular in the fitness world, but it wasn't really as widespread, maybe as you'd say now. Maybe it's a little bit different now, obviously, with everything being inside being restricted. But you know, yoga is huge. You know, everyone has been really interested into it, you know, men and women, spiritual or not, because there's all kinds of different levels of yoga, different styles, different way you can practice. And that's all been kind of introduced to the Western world to increase people's interest and increase people's actual participation in yoga, right? You know, sometimes people aren't really interested in the spiritual aspect at all. And a lot of people who have kind of created these yoga fitness programs, they're called, have kind of stripped away a lot of the spirituality of it, which is interesting. We'll kind of talk about that in a sec. But and then obviously there's like extremely spiritual forms of yoga. It's actually, as I'll mention in a second, it's actually one of the philosophical schools of Hinduism. It's part of the religion of Hinduism. So it is technically part of a religion. It's a practice of a religion. So again, there's obviously deep spiritual connections there. So anyway, a little bit about my history. I actually started, shout out Travis Canellos, I had him on the podcast before, at DNA Fitness. So DNA Fitness used to be in this building, tremendous building. You know, if I ever continue to go down my sports psychology studies, I'd love to open up a clinic really similar to what Travis had going in Burlington off Harvester there. It was like a gym where we worked out, had a little turf there. There was a yoga studio. There was like a basketball court. And then there was like huge like indoor soccer / like whatever you want to do inside, big turf area. It was like a sick complex. And I think there may or may not have been like some chiropractor or physiotherapist or something in there too. Anyway, it was unbelievable. And literally across the hall from the gym was this yoga studio, a hot yoga studio. And, you know, Travis being Travis told us, you know, flexibility is so key. And you know, we had all had at least a couple years under our belts playing university sports at this time. And these are all the other guys I worked out with at DNA at that time. And we all kind of knew the benefits of stretching and all that stuff. And we thought, hey, the place is right here. It's basically like an hour of stretching. That's kind of how we approached it. We didn't even think twice about any spiritual aspects. The instructor came over to the gym and like talked to us and stuff. And we're like, for sure, we're down. And I think we may or may not have done the first course or the first class for free or something like that. And of course, we're all in there, trying our hardest to do the poses, maybe pushing ourselves a little bit too hard, but it was phenomenal, man. Like coming the first time, I remember it, and it's still that feeling you have leaving hot yoga. I don't know how much yoga have you guys done?
Never a class.
A lot of yoga, not hot yoga.
Sorry, we didn't hear you there, Christian.
Sorry, brother. I've done yoga, but I've never done hot yoga.
You haven't done hot? Sorry, Jack?
Nah, never done any classes. Just like poses at home.
Super cool. I'm going to talk about that too. There's like super cool stuff you can do at home, but hot yoga is almost exclusively. I've almost exclusively done hot yoga. I've done a few normal or cold. I don't even know, regular yoga classes, right?
Yeah.
Standard.
Class.
I've done a few of them, but like honestly, man, I sweat just as much in a normal class as I do in a hot one. Right. Like it's wild. Just because I'm a sweaty dude, but like I love hot because everyone else is just as sweaty as I am, so I just blend in.
Yeah.
Just everyone's soaked.
Yeah, sometimes it gets hairy though. I know what you mean. I know what you're thinking there, Jack. I'll talk about that in a second too. But like I said, I've almost exclusively done hot, so that's kind of the studios that I went and joined as things went on. So I continued to do yoga that summer. And then when I moved back to London, I went to Yoga Shack in London. I don't know if you guys know that spot. It's like kind of off Talbot, like behind, like almost Talbot in Oxford, but like behind the tracks, like kind of like behind Seeps a little bit.
I haven't really had my.
It's a little tiny place, super cool. Shout out Yoga Shack. In London, Ontario, but went in there and it's awesome. Again, the hot was just what I was used to, and it's usually just me and like a class full of women, and everyone's just having a great time, and they're always way better and can hold the poses better. And I'm almost certain every instructor always keeps a close eye on me just so I don't go down and like friggin' timber
break someone
and just wipe someone out. And it's funny because I have a giant mat, so I learned that I can't use the standard mat. My shoulders and body are like wider than a standard mat.
Yeah, Mark brings a king size mattress.
I bring like a cutout of like what you do your whole floor with. Like I bring yardage.
Right.
And sometimes I don't show up on time, and like there's a spot big enough for a normal mat, and I roll this thing out, and I'm like 2 inches on each side from the next person, and they're like, "Oh, great! I'm gonna have to deal with this monster." Anyway. And if you're late too, usually the only spots are open like near the front, and you're like, I gotta just roll this whole thing out, and people are like, qu'est-ce que c'est? Anyway, so again, I just you get over it though, because yoga's super cool. Like it's not like coming from extremely competitive sports going into this as an athletic endeavor. In my mind, there's none of that competition with others in class. Like you can look around and be like, oh, she's doing way better, or he's doing way better, but like it's really it's a practice amongst yourself, like against yourself, I want to say, like, but like you're only doing it with yourself, and you can always work on it. Again, yoga is meditation through movement, and anyway, anything can be yoga. I've heard practitioners say, washing the dishes can be yoga because you're moving as long as you're present, and as long as your intention is there, it can be a meditation, which is super cool. Again, and then coming back to Hamilton, I saw it at a place, and there was a place right near my parents' place called De La Soul Yoga. Shout out De La Soul. They got a couple spots around Hamilton, and yeah, like I said, nothing against cold yoga. Like I said, I've done a few places, but again, just most of my journey has kind of been a little bit more in the hot zone.
Warmer.
So I thought I'd talk a little bit about kind of a little bit more background on yoga. It's essentially, if no one knows anything about it, it's essentially a group of physical, mental, and spiritual practices or disciplines which originated in ancient India. Again, like we said, meditation through movement. And yoga is actually, like I mentioned before, yoga is actually one of the 6 orthodox philosophical schools of Hinduism. So it's a tenet of the religion. So again, they in Hinduism, they believe that there's a lot energy channels that move through the body can be manipulated through movement. So that's kind of what their thinking is, which is really interesting. The term, like I mentioned before, the term yoga in the Western world often denotes a modern form of hatha yoga, and yoga is exercise, consisting largely of the postures or asanas. Again, bringing the practice of yoga to the Western world, it sometimes has to be repackaged. And again, unfortunately, some of the spirituality has been really stripped away from it. Again, there's other types of yoga where there's even yoga called Kundalini Yoga, where it's actually a lot of breath work. And Kundalini Yoga actually derives from Kundalini, which is defined in the Vedantic culture as energy that lies dormant at the base of the spine until it's activated by the practice of yoga and channeled upward through the chakras in the process of spiritual perfection. So Kundalini is believed by adherents to be power associated with the divine feminine. So again, the actual word Kundalini can be translated into coiled or round, or like it can also be translated as snake. So that's that idea of that there's a snake or a serpent that travels up from the base of the spine. It's coiled at the base when it's dormant, but when it's activated, it coils up through the chakras, right? And again, in Hindu culture, the serpent and snake isn't as much as we see it as an evil thing in Western culture. It's not so much so in Hindu. So it's not like evil, but it's this energy imagining. And again, it's really, really interesting with Hinduism is because they're kind of trying to explain this stuff scientifically, except at the time where these writings were written, thousands or at least hundreds and hundreds of years ago, thousands, I believe, with Hinduism, when these terms were written, they didn't have scientific terms to talk about, energies traveling up your spinal cord through your neurons, to your brain. Like there's something there, there is a channel of energy that goes, if you're talking purely scientifically, there is electrical impulses that travel up and down your spine. There's no doubt about that. How they originate, whether they originate from any source, that's not so much discussed with science. But again, I've always said, I think religion and science are telling the same story. They're just using different language. And science has been around and figured this stuff out so long ago that potentially religion at one point was science, but it's just so old and been passed down, and the ancient telephone game, and it's been so bastardized and taken over by states and people that wanted to control people that we've lost all like the good bits of religion, right? And then we think that it's this faction and this split between science and religion, they can never meet. And that can't be true. Like, again, I think they definitely are telling the same thing. It's just science is young and it questions itself so often that it's slow moving, where religion has a faith aspect to it. So they're ready to make that leap of faith. Things move a lot quicker. You know what I mean? And again, science refutes itself a lot and does this and that, right? So that's where I think, again, the challenge with introducing yoga to the Western world, again, because really interesting quote actually from Osho, I heard today. The Eastern world and Eastern philosophy has been lopsided. It's over spiritual. They know too much, and they don't think enough about infrastructure and currency and just general societal kind of structures, because they're so in tune with their spirituality. They know that existence is existence. It doesn't matter kind of where you are. Everyone, will potentially be reincarnated again, and you get another try. But where Western culture is also lopsided in the fact that it's almost stripped away from all that spirituality, and it's overly focused on the material. So it'd be nice to marry the two. But again, unfortunately, in that effort, bringing yoga to the Western world, it's had to become power yoga, and it's had to become yoga fitness, and it's had to become this whole idea of it's supposed to help you, lose weight and do this. It's funny enough, even straight up fitness wise, barring hot yoga because it's so hot and you're going to lose weight just from sweating, you don't actually like burn that type of energy with yoga. Like, unless you're doing flows and you're really moving a lot, like the traditional holding a pose for a long time and that type of yoga, it doesn't burn as much like you're not going to lose a lot of fat. It's because it's really low. It's like taking a walk all the time versus like doing sprints or something else, or weight training or something like that. Like you're gonna stay fit and you're gonna stay really loose and stretched out, but there's so much more you kind of have to add to the very traditional, more spiritual practice. Because there's even yogas where it's supported, where you're doing where you're in positions where you're using bolsters and pillows and stuff to kind of hold you in those positions and stuff. So those ones you hold and you can be holding a single position for like 20 minutes, half an hour, a long time. And again, obviously you're not like burning a lot of calories doing that, but that's again the more spiritual side, right? And the more and more of that, right? One of my favorite classes to do, actually, up at De La Soul, again, shout out De La Soul, is Yin Yang. They call it the Yin Yang class, and this is offered at a lot of different studios, but essentially, it's kind of a combination between the gentle hatha or hatha, depending on how you want to pronounce it, hatha flow, where it's kind of a little bit more gentle. You're holding positions a little longer, and like hard, like straight up power flow, like you're moving through positions really quickly, standing up, going down through all these different positions, which I won't go through, but then you're like really burning calories. And again, in the hot yoga scenario, it's really hot and you're just flying through. And that's how like the first half of the class goes, and it's a 60-minute class, let's say. So half an hour you're doing that hardcore, and then the last half is like more chill. You're kind of just relaxing, going through it. And those are my favorite because I think it's kind of the best of both worlds. Again, you can do a full hour of the flow and really get after it. But again, I think, and usually depending on the instructor, you got a good half an hour there to kind of, talk about like some more spiritual aspects. And with that really hardcore, the yang hardcore, or is it yin? Anyway, sorry. The hardcore part kind of cracks you open, and then you're like kind of just like melting goo by the end of it, and you're just really open to some like cool ideas, and just really, really feeling that kind of, again, we talk about psychedelics get you into a meditational kind of mindset kind of automatically. Obviously, like active meditation can get you into that mindset. And again, that's how yoga is meditation through movement, because your body is demanding so much of you that your mind is so focused on what the body is doing. It now allows the mind to start to travel a little bit more, because it's not thinking about, what I'm going to do later for dinner. And sometimes, of course, when you're holding these positions, sometimes your mind does wander to these places. But again, that's what's part of the practice, is that eventually you're going to start to get comfortable with the positions, and you're going to feel that ease into that meditative state. Really, really interesting. And again, obviously, if you're really just first getting into things, take it super easy. Every instructor I've ever met has been excellent as far as knowing when it's your first class. And obviously, we can't really be going into studios as the day of this podcast being recorded. Hopefully, by the time you're listening to this, more studios are open. But all instructors are taught, rigorously how to introduce someone to yoga, and there's a lot of beginner classes out there and everything. And again, take your time with everything, because even, I was well into my practice doing it for a few years, and then one day it was a morning class that I was going to. I didn't eat any breakfast, but I drank a lot of water, and I had to go puke. I had to get up in the middle of the class and leave and go to the washroom, just because, it happens, right? So, anytime things get overwhelming, especially in a hot class, you can always just lay down there. It's called in Shavasana, and just lay on your back there, and just relax until you're good. You can honestly just lay there the whole class. They don't mind. But again, you can always ease yourself into it, right? Yeah. And I've seen people fall asleep in class before, man. It's hilarious. But again, and there's many classes you can kind of choose from, and it's super cool. Actually, one of the books I read on yoga is called The Science of Yoga. Really, really interesting book. Kind of breaks things down, obviously a little bit more scientific terms, but it's looking at every kind of aspect of yoga in a little bit more of a research methods based approach. And I kind of just wrote down the chapters here. So one of the chapters is health, obviously what we've covered a lot today, how yoga does help with your health. Helps with blood flow. It helps with digestion with the twists. Again, whether this is hot or cold. Again, usually if you're just starting, it's best to start with cold. But either way, with hot, you're going to get a little bit more of that blood flow benefit. And I find with hot, it almost warms you up a little bit more, right? Obviously because it's hot, you're literally warmed up before you even start. So I think it can tend to decrease injury a little bit more, but again, you got to make sure you're hydrated. Fit Perfection is one of the really cool sections of the book. So that's where it's really talking about how yoga has become this big fitness angle and this fitness focus, where it's all about just perfecting your body and looking good, and that's kind of egotistical, right? Where that's part and parcel. Yoga is kind of going against that. It's trying to it's trying to deal with the ego in a little bit more healthy way, right? Rather than and not to say that everyone that's trying to be fit and healthy and change their body are ego driven, but when it's all about how you look and how you look on Instagram, it has that narcissistic flavor to it. And that, again, is almost completely against what yoga is about in the first place, which is in Hinduism, I guess, in the first place, right? So really, really interesting part of the book there. It talks about risk of injury. Again, like we mentioned before, obviously, especially with hot yoga, if you have any heart problems, you got to be careful with that. Obviously, you can overstretch. You can, reach too far in some of these positions and get yourself into trouble. There's headstands and stuff that some people have had really serious neck injuries from, and other types of heart cardiovascular injuries. So again, obviously everything comes with a risk, but this book goes into it pretty in depth. Another right after that chapter actually is called the chapter is called Healing, which is really fascinating because obviously there's many stories in the book about people dealing with injuries, people dealing with terrible back pain, chronic pain, this and that, and they turn to yoga, and it really helped them. One of the craziest stories that I actually was involved with was one summer I was doing a couple classes at Shanti Yoga. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore in Hamilton. That was cold. That was regular cold yoga, whatever we want to call it. And me and my buddy were in there doing a class, and the teacher was talking to us, right? And he was just doing his regular thing, talking about being perseverance, stuff like that. It was a little bit more of a meditative class, so we were kind of talking about some really interesting stuff. And I wish I remember this gentleman's name, but we ended up talking about the Grey Cup after, of all things, and then all of a sudden got into he used to play baseball. Really cool guy. I don't know if he was doing it. I can't remember if he was playing in Hamilton or not at the time, but he was playing baseball and he took he was running to the base, and I guess this is the yoga instructor. I forget his name. I wish I remember it. It's Carl or something like that. Sorry, brother. If you're out there and you're listening, I'm sorry, but let's call him Carl. Carl was running to the base, and I guess someone threw the ball to try and get him out, and it hit him in the base of the skull, and it paralyzed him. Quadriplegic, bro. In the hospital, couldn't move. Carl's like, what the fuck? Like, what am I gonna do? Blah blah blah. He starts someone like sets up a thing that he can start reading. He starts learning about yoga and meditation. Goes to like gurus come to him and stuff. He starts to like seriously get into it. He starts moving again. He starts doing yoga. He starts teaching yoga. The guy was a quadriplegic, man. And he said it was like basically he like thought himself back into health. Yeah.
Love that.
Right? Which is like so cool. And I wish I knew his name because I'd love to have him on the pod. But yeah, that was one of the craziest things ever. And again, the power of yoga that, it allows you to really focus on certain aspects of your body and certain movements that you do that don't normally come into your life. And, the human body isn't adapted for all the comforts that we deal with nowadays. It's only been over the last few hundred years, potentially even shorter, that we've created all these, comforts of living, right? Chairs and cars and this and shoes for our feet. Like, we were used to just like running around, right? Maybe riding a horse, but other than that, we were just hoofing it. And, a lot of right? a lot of modern day comforts have, really just like kind of turned us to shit. And it's good to challenge yourself, right? And again, yoga I think can really do that. And if it can heal people like that, man, there's something to it, right? Like just knowing that man exists, Carl or whatever your name is, we love you. A couple other chapters, divine sex. Everyone wants to know about that. Obviously super cool. There's like a tantric yoga practice, which is like a sexual practice. And I think Sting, shout out Sting, does it, and you can like have sex for 12 hours or something like that. I don't know who's got the time for that, but no. But again, that's an interesting aspect of the book. And again, it gets into that a little bit more. So check it out, The Science of Yoga, really interesting book. And, like I said, if you're really just getting into this, or if you've been doing it for a while and you're like me and you're trying to get back into it, obviously it's been tough with COVID and everything, but like there's YouTube. You can go on YouTube and you can get Yoga with Adrienne. I don't know if anyone's ever done that. Super cool videos. They're like 20 minutes to an hour. This super cool instructor, she knows how to do it. She's been doing tons of videos, really comforting. She's got lots of intro classes. She's got lots of, beginner stuff, and then also a little bit more intermediate stuff. And again, like I said, shout out De La Soul. They're doing online classes as well. You can go on their website, check that out. And like I said, hopefully I'm going to get back to you guys with a little update that I'm getting back into the yoga scene. I'll keep you guys posted, and check out the Patreon. I'll post some more stuff there. Patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. Like everything, hit that bell, follow us, rate us. We love you all. Check you out soon. Peace.